And the stimulus negotiations continue. Today, we have both sides posturing for a position to see who is going to provide the best possible stimulus package for the American people. We also have reports of a new group of politicians, specifically senators, that are putting together a new stimulus proposal or bill or idea in hopes of getting the momentum behind the stimulus negotiation and stimulus package and get that going once again. We're coming down to the deadline, so it's very important that we see movement, and that is exactly what we've seen over the last week. The movement has been very small, it's been very slow, but it's been happening. We also have reports of what they're talking about, and I'm going to explain that in today's video. But even though we have some good news, of course, we have some bad news and some problems. Here's what we know. The problem right now is that the House, they do not come back, and they are not back in session until Wednesday. This is just the House. They are also off again after December 11th. So, they're going to have about 7 working days. They'll have all of it next week, and they will have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So technically 8 days, but that's all they have. So really they have 8 working days to get something done or run the risk of millions of Americans' lives. The Senate, they are back in session today. That's good news. Here's the bad news. The Senate is in session until December 18th, but they could leave early. They could leave early because their priority is not stimulus. That's not their priority. Their priority as of right now is actually just passing judicial nominees. Well, that's the bad news. Good news, they're in session. Bad news is their priority is not on stimulus. The worst part about all of this is that while millions of Americans are waiting around for Congress to act, Congress is off on vacation or recess, spending time with their loved ones and just enjoying life because, they did their job and now they have some days off. Most Americans are not hoping for days off because they've spent weeks, possibly months. Some people have spent the last 8 months without a job because there's no job for them. Their employer sent them home. And we're waiting for Congress to act so that we can finally get back to work. This is why this is so tough. It's because we're relying on certain individuals. We're always told, don't rely on other people. But in this instance, we are all relying on Congress to do their job so that we can get back to work and do our job. Former President Obama's chief of staff, or actually chief economist, not chief of staff, had something to say about the posturing on this. He stated, Democrats should agree to a smaller stimulus as Americans are currently hurting. This is true. This is not just something that he has said. This is something that many people have reiterated time and time again. It's that it doesn't matter what is in the package. Get it done. Get the money out to the American people. The longer we wait, the more people will be hurting. This is the overall consensus among many Democrats as well. Just pass something now to help however we can, and as we see there's more issues later on, we will come back and pass another bill at that time. The problem, though, is that the one person holding up a smaller stimulus package is House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. And yes, I'm not just going to bash Nancy Pelosi and say it's all her fault. But it is all her fault that we cannot pass a smaller stimulus package. But on the flip side of things, yes, Mitch McConnell is also holding up a larger, comprehensive stimulus package. So depending on where we go, if we go small stimulus, then Nancy Pelosi is going to hold that up. If it's a larger stimulus package, Mitch McConnell will not bring that package to the floor. And I get it. Because as of right now, reports indicate that even if Mitch McConnell agreed to put a $2.4 trillion stimulus package on the floor of the Senate, in most cases, most experts are saying it would not pass $2.4 trillion is way too high, and it would see no support. Zero Republicans would support this. All Democrats would jump on board, but it would have zero support from the GOP, which means it would not pass, and then it would die in the Senate once again. It is because of this that all signs point to a smaller, scaled down, targeted stimulus package passing at some point. When this happens, again, we don't know. How much is it going to be? Again, we don't know. This does mean larger unemployment benefits would be off the table. $600 per week wouldn't happen. No hazard pay would come from this. It's already not being discussed. Hazard pay has almost been completely written off. However, nobody has actually stated that it's off the table, that we're not considering it. But most experts do predict that hazard pay is not being discussed. Also, Social Security boosts wouldn't happen in a stimulus package. It wouldn't happen under President Trump's watch. Maybe under Joe Biden if he wins, but again, we'll just have to wait and see. School funding would still happen, but it would be limited. Most likely be in the ballpark of $100 billion. Testing, tracing, and treatment might have very little funding as well. Stimulus checks are not a done deal either. Not on a small scale stimulus package. Now, it is most likely stimulus checks would be included because many Republicans and Democrats have stated that there is no reason to provide PPP funding for a small business if the people that would frequent that business, okay, you and I, residents, don't have money to go and pay for the services or pay for the goods or buy the food that business is offering. So you got to support both sides. You can't just support the business and not the consumer. It has to be both sides. It has to be equal, or else one of the two is going to falter. And right now, who knows about state and local government funding either? I know all this sounds bad, but we do have some good news. Reports this morning are stating that there is a new group of senators that are proposing and working and have been working on a new proposal. The reports this morning state that Democrats Chris Coons, Joe Manchin, Mark Warner, Dick Durbin, and Michael Bennet, as well as Republicans Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, and Rob Portman. Okay, this is an informal group of senators who have been working over Thanksgiving break to try to put together and come up with some type of bipartisan agreement where a stimulus bill could ultimately come through, because they want to figure out where stimulus could fall. Are we having support on this piece of legislation, for example, hazard pay? If it's a yes, put it in there. If it's no, let's get rid of it. They do not want to worry about stuff that doesn't have bipartisan support. Same thing with things like the FBI building in Washington, D.C. and renovating that for, I think, was it $1.5 or $2 billion? Do we have support there? Republicans say, yes, we support this. Democrats are like, no, we don't support this. Okay, let's get rid of it. Let's not talk about that at this point. So, based on reports, this group is not intending to propose a new bill. That's not the goal here. But it's to show the leaders that there is overwhelming majority support in certain areas. We kind of already know this. Steve Mnuchin and Nancy Pelosi got very close to a deal just a month ago. Actually, a little bit over a month ago. And they were close to striking a deal before the election. But ultimately, everything fell apart. Their goal with this group, with this group of senators, is to get the leaders to agree to pass targeted stimulus where there is current bipartisan support, bipartisan agreement. That's their ultimate goal. That's the only goal with this group. It's not to put together a new bill and get a bunch of people behind it and rally behind it, be like, yes, that's great. It's better than the Problem Solvers Caucus proposal. That's better than the HEALS Act, and that's better than the HEROES Act 2.0 or HEROES Light. That's not their goal. That's not their goal with this. Okay? It's just to get agreement and just to get the leaders to get back to the table and negotiate on the things that they have found have overwhelming bipartisan support. Again, this is good news because this could break the stalemate that we are currently in. And that's the goal. Rob Portman, Republican Rob Portman, stated that this package would most likely include, and I'm going to give you a list of stuff that's going to include, there's going to be things here that's missing, but just understand this is just what he stated, that it could include, not that it will, it could include. It would most likely include another round of stimulus checks. Like I said, we need to keep the balance between the businesses and the consumer. It has to be balanced, or else the businesses will ultimately fail once again. There will be more PPP funding for small businesses directly impacted by COVID. This is one of the things that they have said will be in the bill is PPP funding, but it has to be written correctly where large corporations cannot take funding because they've seen a small loss. But it wasn't a loss due to COVID. It's because they just have a poorly run company or their product just is not performing well, whatever it may be, right? That's the goal here. Also, they want to include money for healthcare to support hospitals and their increased workload. This isn't new, but this is something that is newer on a Republican side, is that let's not just support hospitals and clinics by providing liability protections because they're overworked and chances are they're going to make some mistakes. Okay, that's great, but why don't we not just fix that problem? Why don't we fix the actual underlying issue, which is, they're understaffed. Let's bring in more staff. And this is one way you could do that is to provide funding for hospitals to allow them to increase their workload, which is bring in more staff, hire more people. Makes sense. Also, providing funding for vaccine distribution. This is key because reports out are stating that the first batch of Pfizer's vaccine has landed here in the United States. And so it's just waiting on approval from the FDA and then it will be distributed. Well, how this gets distributed, who pays for all this, is currently unknown. But it needs to happen. Also, extending unemployment and possibly $400 per week in an unemployment boost. This is higher than what we expected. Most people are expecting about $300. But this, Rob Portman is stating probably $400. I've been saying this for probably about 2 months, is $400 based on all the reports I've read, based on doing my own research as to how much the average rent is in certain states versus how much the maximum benefit is per state for unemployment benefits. When you factor everything in, it's about $375 per week that is needed on top of the maximum state benefits just to be able to survive. So $400 would provide that. So I think $400, $400 to $450 is probably what it's going to settle at. And also, they want to extend the eviction moratorium. What is not mentioned here, okay, and it's a big thing being discussed, is rental assistance. It's not being mentioned here by Rob Portman. It's also not something that Mitch McConnell is serious about passing. The problem with no rental assistance is it's not just the renter that's going to be impacted for the rest of their lives because they will most likely never be able to pay back what they owe. If they don't have a job and their rent is, let's say, $1,000 a month, that's fairly inexpensive. Let's say it's $1,000 a month, they don't have a job, they've been out of a job, haven't paid for their apartment for 5 months. That's $5,000. Well, let's say they go back to work next month, the eviction moratorium is over, so now it's their responsibility to pay their landlord $5,000 in back rent, plus keep up with their rent now. How do you think people are going to do that without rental assistance? It's just not going to happen. So, we'll have to see. What we do know is that there is bipartisan support of a bill. But what is included in that bill, when this bill could ultimately be passed, that is what's going to play a major role when it gets passed. What is in it? will play a major role as to when it gets passed. We know that. What I can tell you is that if another stimulus package can't get passed, and there's still a chance that President Trump could do another round of executive orders and extend these things. He could extend eviction protections, which would be very, very beneficial to millions and millions of Americans. He could extend student loan deferrals. Here's the issue. Many students usually go and take a part-time job. Okay? They take a part-time job, they work, whatever, and obviously in the field that they want to pursue after graduation, or they want to, out there, maybe they already graduated and now they're working in their field, but they were laid off. They've been laid off for months. Here's the issue. You're just laid off. You don't have any other skills besides what you just went to school for. They're not hiring, but now you have to pay back your student loan. How do you do that? Again, more issues. Unemployment. This would also be extended. However, President Trump would most likely not do another executive order for an unemployment boost. It would just be for an extension of unemployment benefits. It would mainly help the self-employed and gig workers, but it would also provide, I believe, a little bit of an extension in case you ran out of weeks. So again, that's just what's being reported right now. I don't know exactly how this would be written or what would it entail, but this is what we know. And possibly there could be states that see a COVID relief extension. Okay, so like I stated earlier today and also yesterday as well, is states have a deadline of December 31st to spend all their COVID relief funding from the CARES Act. If they do not spend it, it goes back to the U.S. government. Again, all signs as of right now are pointing to the fact that we should see a stimulus agreement at some point. But what is in the agreement and when it ultimately gets passed is currently the unknown. This morning, Steny Hoyer, who is the House Majority Leader, he stated, "Getting a deal done now before the end of the year is crucial, even if this means accepting a smaller stimulus package." With somebody as high up as Steny Hoyer is, it is really good news that he is stating this at this time. What this tells me is that there are discussions being held behind closed doors, most likely between Nancy Pelosi and Democrats, about passing stimulus and passing a stimulus package that is smaller and more targeted. We know they're having these conversations, but as far as how these conversations go and what direction they're ultimately leading to, are they leading to, okay, this is what Republicans are offering, $500 to $1 trillion, but I feel we need to stick to 2.2, 2.4, or are we coming down to 1.5? How are these negotiations going? How are these discussions happening? We don't know that. Democrats are very good at staying somewhat tight-lipped and not addressing the media, telling them all their secrets. Republicans, on the other hand, they'll tell you whatever you want to hear. But as I stated yesterday, neither party can afford to look weak at this time. They can't do that because if they look weak, it will hurt them in the Georgia Senate runoff election come January 5th, which means that even though discussions could be ongoing and could be happening and that we could see progress, I don't expect something to really happen if it requires Nancy Pelosi to also support it. If we can go and bypass Nancy Pelosi through a discharge petition, I do feel that we could ultimately see a stimulus package. And that could happen. Kevin McCarthy said that that is something that he really wants to do, and he's been working with Democrats to possibly do this. Whether we see it happen this week or not, again, that's unknown. All I know is that as of right now, I've taken a lot of time to research a lot of this stuff. And at this moment, everything could fall into place. Could get all these dominoes to fall perfectly and fall perfectly in line, and we could see a stimulus package. Or we could see it all fall apart, break down, and we see absolutely nothing. So, just want to thank you guys for watching today's video. Consider subscribing so I continue so I can continue to keep you updated on all things stimulus and how you too can make money from home. Again, make sure you smash that thumbs up button if you enjoyed today's video. Share this video with your friends, family, and coworkers over on Facebook as well so they too can stay updated, and I'll see you guys on the next one.